One of the things that has happened in recent weeks that brings joy to my heart and encouragement is that over at St. Pat's on Saturday during Mass, Clara has started singing along with some of the songs. Was she singing along here? So I don't know if she knows our hymns necessarily, but at the Catholic Mass, they repeat the same things week after week, and so she's picked up on them. Especially she likes the Alleluia. And she's not afraid to sing it out loud, and I appreciate that. Do you ever wonder why we sing in church? Now, I'm going to ask the question later on why we sing at all. Why do human beings sing? But why in church? What is it about the worship of God and about our purpose here that makes us think that singing is important? Because we all do it. Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, every denomination, we all sing. We sing differently, different kinds of songs, different tone, different speed, different accompaniment, but we all sing. And that goes all the way back to the earliest days of the church. Paul himself in our reading from Philippians was talking about songs. David wrote a bunch of songs for worship. Why do we sing in church? I want you to think about that. What is it about singing that brings us closer to God? What is it about singing that helps us worship? I'm going to tell you a story as a way of introduction. This is a true story. Happened in 1873, 146 years ago. A man named Horatio G. Spofford. And if you open up your hymnal to 493, go ahead and grab your hymnal, open it up to 493, look down at the author, and you'll see Horatio G. Spofford. You'll notice what hymn I'm talking about, because most of the hymns in our hymnal have a story behind them. Sometimes that story is pretty dramatic. This is probably one of the most dramatic stories in the entire telling of our hymnal writers. Horatio G. Spofford wrote, "It is well with my soul." And if you think about that first verse, when sorrows like sea billows roll, consider that as I tell you about his life. Horatio G. Spofford lived with his wife and 4 daughters in Chicago. If you know Chicago at the end of the 19th century, you know about the Great Chicago Fire. Apparently Mrs. O'Leary's cow and all that burned the city down practically. He lost everything, his business. He went from being well off to being in financial trouble overnight when it burned down. Shortly thereafter, he sent his wife and 4 daughters on a steamer ship to England. The Spofford family were friends with the great evangelist Dwight D. Moody. And Dwight D. Moody was massively influential in the history of Chicago, the founding of Moody Bible Institute, among others. They were friends, and Moody was in England, and they were looking for a new start, for a vacation, for a chance to get things back on their feet. And so he sent his wife and his daughters to England, but he stayed behind because he had zoning things to square away with the city of Chicago about rebuilding his business after the fire. So he had to deal with zoning. Everybody loves dealing with zoning, right? It's like your favorite thing to deal with when you want to build. And so he stayed behind. On November 21st, 1873, the ocean liner Ville de Havre, it's French, Havre, I don't know how they pronounce it, doesn't matter. It was hit by another boat in the night and sank quickly. Many aboard perished, including all 4 of Horatio's daughters. When she arrived in England, his wife sent a telegram, "Saved alone. What shall I do?" He got on a boat and went to England to be with her so they could come back home. And as they crossed the Atlantic, the captain who knew about his story said to him, we're going by the spot. This is where the ship sank. And that's where the words came to him, when sorrows like sea billows roll, as they certainly did in his life. After the sinking of the ship and the loss of his 4 daughters, in 1877, 4 years later, Horatio Jr. was born. In 1878, their daughter Bertha was born. And then Horatio died of scarlet fever. And then lastly, in 1881, their daughter Grace was born. That's a bold name to name your child after all that they had been through. After Grace was born, the Spofford family moved to Jerusalem. It's not really part of the writing of the hymn because it had already been written by now, but it's fascinating to me because last week I was talking to you out of the book of Joel about Jerusalem and about a book that I had read about Jerusalem. The Spofford family is in that book because when they moved to Jerusalem, they founded what's called the American Colony. A group of Americans, like-minded Americans. They were joined by some Swedish evangelicals later on, and they founded this colony where after, as time went on, they became friendly with the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians in the community. They were one of the only groups that could get along with everybody. And during World War I, they ran an orphanage and a soup kitchen. During the Armenian genocide and during all of the troubles of World War I, they were there in Jerusalem, the Spofford family, along with those that had joined them, helping people in need. Horatio himself only lived a few years longer than when they came to Jerusalem. He died of illness. Later on, a man named Philip Bliss wrote the music that goes to this hymn. Look in your hymnal. If you didn't put it away, what's the name of the tune? He named the tune Ville de Havre, the boat that sank with Horatio's 4 daughters. Those incidents inspired him to write a song of praise to God. That's pretty amazing. Most of us couldn't arise to that. But what does inspire us to sing? We certainly at Thanksgiving have more to be thankful for than Horatio did that year with his sorrow. Let's look at Psalm 98 and what the psalmist tells us about singing. It says this, "Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him." We're told here to make a new song. Some of you would be terrified if we gave you the assignment, come back next week with a song of praise to God that you've written, right? Some of you would be like, no, I don't write songs. But the psalmist says to the people of God, sing them a new song. New songs come out every year, don't they? Those of you who listen to Christian radio, there's always a new song coming out. Even though we've been writing songs for thousands of years on this topic, new ones still come out. You ever wonder why we sing? Why do human beings sing? Whales sing. Some other animals, birds sing. But why do people sing? And why is it that almost universally, in every language and culture in history, when holding a newborn baby, moms and dads start singing? Why do we sing to our little children? Why does it calm them? Right? You can't get that kid to stop crying, and so what do? You start singing. Sometimes a nonsense song. We've got all these kids' songs, Twinkle, Twinkle, and Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and all of these things that don't make any sense. And sometimes kids sing all sorts of songs that are just fun. It's creative. It's emotional. Sometimes there's joy in it, but we do sing. And God wants his people to join in singing. That's the long and short answer of why we do that. Why do we sing in church? Because we've been told to sing. Because there is something about singing that connects us to the creative nature of our God. And so the psalmist says, sing a new song, for he has done marvelous things. That's the inspiration for our singing. What is it that we're supposed to sing to God about? The marvelous things, the things that God has done. So then we must ask ourselves, what then has God done for us that is marvelous? And if you needed a topic for Thanksgiving sitting around the table before the prayer, there you go. What has God done for us that is marvelous? Because that is what we are thankful for. That's what we can sing about. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. Now, this is not God saving himself, that salvation for him. He didn't need to be saved. God's fine. God has never been in need. Rather, it is the people of God who have been on the receiving end of the salvation that his right arm, his holy arm, have worked. The next phrase emphasizes that. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. That God is willing to save is a marvelous thing. That God has made that willingness known to people is, of course, much better, because if we didn't know about it, it wouldn't be good. I was just reading in the paper yesterday, or the paper online in the news, about a whole bunch of veterans who are now missing out on their GI Bill benefits because someone told them that their service was done and they could retire with the full GI benefit, but it turns out they were 5 days short or 10 days short because somebody did the math wrong. Math will get you if you don't do it right. And so they didn't know. Nobody made known to them that they needed to stay in for another week or another month in order to get that benefit. Fortunately for us, we're not in that situation because God has made himself known. And by the way, I'm hoping Congress or somebody's going to fix that right quick because that's a crying shame. But God has made his righteousness known. Notice that when he makes his salvation known, he makes his righteousness known. Because the salvation that God offers is in keeping with his righteousness. When God decided to save, he decided to save the right way. There was no thought in the mind of God to save humanity in a way that did not conform to his righteousness. God doesn't work that way. And so when God makes known his salvation, he's making known his righteousness too, because they are intricately linked together. Got to take a drink. My voice is in trouble here. Verse 3, he has remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. The psalmist is talking about what God remembered and his faithfulness. He's thinking back in the history of Israel from his day to prior generations, thinking back to Abraham and the covenant when God called him and said, I will make you a great nation, thinking back to Moses when God led the people up out of Egypt to the promised land through Joshua, thinking about all the things that God has done for Israel. And then he says, all the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Thinking about what God has done for Israel reminds him that that is supposed to be a testament to all the nations. Remember that God said to Abraham, all nations will be blessed through you. It's not just you that I'm seeking to bless, but you will be the conduit to all nations. God's love for Israel would be a signal to the whole world that they would make known the holiness of God, the righteousness and the love of God, that all people might come to the Israelites and say, we need to know this God of yours, this God who has blessed you. We know that ultimately the psalmist didn't know this yet, but ultimately God would fulfill that promise to Abraham through the coming of his Messiah. And we will begin to celebrate that next week as Advent starts. Whoops, missed. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music to the Lord with harp. with the harp and the sound of singing, with trumpets and the blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord, the King. So what then is our response to thinking about the love of God, the righteousness of God, and how he has made that known to us? Our response is to shout, to sing, to make music, all variety of music, stringed instruments and trumpets and all sorts of instruments, any kind of music, with joy, with celebrating. Some of our songs are a bit somber. Some of our psalms are a bit serious, but the vast majority of the songs that we sing in church are joyous. That's why when we do a funeral, there's like 6 hymns in the hymnal that we rotate between, because they're really the only ones that are of that feeling. The vast majority of our songs are uplifting and upbeat and encouraging, because that is exactly how we feel when we speak to God, when we interact with God. So what makes you sing? When do you sing? Some of you sing here at church. Try to get all of you to sing. I would like all of you to sing out loud. Not all of you do. I hope everyone does. But what does make you sing? Do you sing in the car? I don't want to know if you sing in the shower, but do you sing in the car when you're by yourself? Some of you, sometimes. Maybe a certain song gets you singing. I'll tell you a little something I didn't expect, because I've never really done this before. This year during the 50K, you guys know I ran that race with tremendous stomach cramps. It was pretty brutal. They came on me pretty hard at about mile 10. It's a 31-mile race, so I had a long way yet to go. At about mile 25, as I was, what was I there? Almost at the 6-hour mark, maybe about the 5-hour and 40-minute mark. A song popped into my head. I didn't sing it out loud because I'd been running for 5.5 hours. I was dehydrated. I needed my air. So I wasn't going to sing out loud, but a song popped into my head, and it was kind of on repeat for the next hour or so. It was a little unusual because it doesn't normally happen to me when I'm singing, or when I'm running, I don't sing. It's not me. I like the quiet contemplativeness. But the song that was in my head was "In Christ Alone. My hope is found, he is my strength." Because I was in need of something. I don't know why that song popped into my head at that time, but it was a big help. And it stayed there for quite a while through till I got to the finish and saw Clara and Nicole and said, "Finally, I'm done." What makes us sing? What inspires us to sing? Let the sea resound and everything in it. Let the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. Obviously, this is a metaphor, right? You've picked up on that. This is not literally the sea singing and the mountains clapping. This is the psalmist saying that the whole world should share the joy of the people of God when they sing out to God, because the entire world benefits from what God is doing in the salvation of his people. And we certainly know that one day there will be a new earth, one that is not suffer from the delinquencies of this world that we live in. Lastly, he says this: "Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity." So if you ever stand before a judge in a judicial proceeding, I would not recommend that you bust out a song at that time. I'm just saying, if you got a judge with no sense of humor, you might find yourself in contempt of court. This is not encouraging you to do that. Don't do that. If you have a judge like Harry Anderson from Night Court, he would enjoy it, but most judges are not like him. That's an unusual time to say, "Sing," when you are standing before the judge of all the earth. That doesn't really feel to me like the time when I would say, "Sing." You're supposed to be quiet when you're standing in front of the judge. And yet, the people of God can sing and should shout with joy before the righteous judge of all the earth, because God has made known his salvation. We saw that earlier. Instead of standing before that judge with fear, we stand before that judge, our Creator, with joy, because Jesus Christ, by his death and resurrection, has removed our fear, has replaced that fear with joy. For instead of facing death, we have been given life. Instead of despair, we stand before our judge with hope. So we began this psalm with this thought: sing to the Lord a new song. And I say, absolutely, we have every reason to sing. Thoughts I want you to hold on to as we walk away from this message. Number one, we absolutely need to sing to the Lord. Whether you like to sing, whether you can carry a tune or not, this is a command of God. This is imperative of the people of God. We need to sing. Secondly, we have every reason to celebrate the love and faithfulness of God by which we've been saved. We have all the motivation we need to sing. So let's do it. Therefore, let us sing with joy to our God.